Welcome to the Elevated Coach Podcast. I am your host, Joel Burgess, and it is my goal that with this podcast, you are fueled with all the tools, techniques, strategies, systems, and insights to become more potent and powerful in your coaching and more profitable in your business. The podcast is a mix of solo episodes and interviews with incredible coaches doing amazing things. I really hope that you enjoyed today's show, and if you do, go ahead and share it with a coach that you think would benefit from it. Let's get stuck in, and sending you so much love.
Hey Hugh, so we are live, and the tradition on this podcast is that the last guest asks the first question for the new guest. So my last guest, Casper, asked, what makes a great coach?
A great coach is somebody who genuinely cares about their client and can connect to them on a human level, I would say.
Yeah, I love that caring about their clients. There's something that's really been playing in my head since I heard it from my coach, a guy called Stephen McGee, he said, care so much that you don't care what other people think of you, or don't care what your client thinks of you. And I think that's kind of a false understanding of caring about your clients, right? That it's all niceties and we sort of pander to them, but actually sometimes when you care for someone, it's the hard truths that need to be said. So I love that. And what was the second part, the human to connection?
Yeah, absolutely. To create a beautiful human connection, that you genuinely feel that connection with your client, so that you feel that you're one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. And how does that feel to you?
It feels like joy. It feels like pure joy. And it's about connecting to your own joy and understanding that your joy is their joy. It's all one. And I very much feel that as coaches, if we're creating this safe, non-judgmental space for our clients to really sit and brainstorm and optimize their best solutions, it's really being at one with our clients, I would say. So connecting to them on a really beautiful human level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. Alistair Gray, in a previous podcast, who's also a current coach of mine, he talks of this oneness that is created with total non-judgmental awareness. It's just you enter this state where you're just one with each other, and in total flow state, it feels like to me, of just there's no effort.
It's also, I'd say, beautiful vulnerability, because we expect our clients to be open with us, and I think it's incredibly important for us to be open with our clients as well, for all of the guards to be down, so that we can completely connect and really serve. And serving is really important. The only agenda being is to help them deliver whatever it is that they're looking to deliver.
I'm curious as to the place for vulnerability and how you tune into where's that coming from, because sometimes from experience there has been times I've shared or asked a question or what have you. It's very much actually coming from my ego or my desire to be validated or seen in that time, and actually taking away from my clients. So I'm curious as to how you decipher where your share is coming from, and whether it would be useful. I totally agree with you how powerful vulnerability is. It really creates that relatability and connection. But how do you decipher and tune into, is it useful to the coaching container?
I mean, first of all, I don't see vulnerability as a way of building ego. It's more about, I see vulnerability as the ultimate strength, in that if you let your guard down and you don't if you don't actually need a guard up in the first place, there's ultimate power in that, because you have nothing to lose. And that enables you to be completely open and honest. And that's a beautiful place to be. So it's not even necessarily about sharing with the client unless they actively ask you to, or unless the situation warrants it. It's about being completely open. So when I talk about vulnerability, I'm talking about not having any guards up at all. And therefore being completely open to the client, which then creates an environment, a very safe, non-judgmental environment for the clients to open up themselves as well. And I find that 99.9% of the time when I'm talking to, whether it's clients actually, but now in my life generally, the average person, the guards down so that I can connect to people very beautifully, very quickly. You know, I had a couple of conversations yesterday, for example, and in both the conversations, the other party very quickly said to me that they never say these things to other people. And they were, considering I'd never spoken to them before, they were completely new conversations. It was amazing how quickly the guards came down and how quickly they were able to just open up and be completely vulnerable and say to me that they never talk to their friends like that, they never talk to their family like that, and they don't know why they've done it, but it was such a beautiful place to be in. So that's what I'm talking about vulnerability, is the strength that it gives people to open up and talk about whatever, because the permission's there. So it's not even as though I'm looking for the permission to share my vulnerability, unless it's asked for, and I'm very comfortable doing that because I have nothing to hide. It's giving the clients the permission to do that. And not just clients, because I think this flows through into all areas of my life now.
Yeah, totally. I think that's such a beautiful answer. The arrival of just being totally open-hearted. And again, something I've shared before is when you come from this open state with an open heart and there's nothing to prove, you actually can't be wrong. It's just about allowing it to flow through you. And I've also had those experiences of perhaps at dinner parties next to someone I've just met, and they sort of go, oh, I can't believe I've just told you that. I've never told people, I never talk to this depth. This is the first time I've started talking about my dreams and what I really want to do with my life. And I'm curious, actually, it's a post I read yesterday. It said something like, you could only meet people as deep as they've gone with themselves, or as deep as you've gone with themselves. So I'm curious as to like how you cultivate this openness. Is it a very intentional practice? How you develop that openness? Because I think it all starts with us, but I'm curious what comes up for you as I ask that.
It's been an absolute journey for me, I would say. I've gone from being very closed, feeling like an imposter throughout my life, as a function of losing my family very early on in life. Nearly all of my family, remaining a twin brother, but other than that, I lost my parents and my older brother when I was a child, in fact, and lost everything. So and come from a mixed race background as well, went to a very privileged little primary school, and then ended up going to the worst state school in the whole of Essex, full of racists and whatever else. So, it was quite a challenging upbringing, and because of that, and having to start pretty much from the bottom, and working my way up to becoming, a global CEO, I've dealt with a lot of imposter syndrome and a lot of, needing to fit in, and a lot of building false identities. I went through many, many years, decades, in fact, into my mid to late 30s before I would even acknowledge my heritage, because I could be anything to anybody. So I would create these fake personas. And just identities. One day I'd be Cuban, another day I'd be Spanish, another day I'd be Italian. I could be anything I wanted to be, but I thought I was empowering myself, but actually I was hiding, and I was doing the same thing as a CEO. Even though I didn't necessarily want to hide behind those grand titles, after a while I became quite lazy and ended up being defined by it, and really stopped connecting with people. So my journey has been quite a long journey, starting with meditation, absolutely, and connecting and going on an amazing meditation journey, starting with mindfulness and then going through learning about Buddhist meditation, and then that evolving into something called non-duality, which has led me to connect into awareness and consciousness, but primarily joy. And the more that I've connected to that and removed the layers, the false layers of ego and narrative that had been created all the way through my life, like peeling away the layers of an onion and getting back to the essential core of myself, which is just pure joy, and realizing that my pure joy is everybody else's pure joy. It's exactly the same thing when you remove all of those layers. It's just enabled me to connect far more deeply to myself and therefore to others as well. Now, that journey was a journey, as I say, of self-reflection and meditation to start with, and lots of study around that. And then I absolutely supercharged that about 4.5, 5 years ago by setting up a relationship with a life coach. And I had no idea what life coaching was. And I did it as part of my journey, and it totally transformed my life. And the major part of that was transformational for me was self-compassion. And there was an exercise around self-compassion that we did in one of the sessions that amazingly only took about 15 minutes, but it just took the weight of the world off my shoulders. And in particular, all the judgment that I placed on myself over the years, and it had created all of this armor that was protecting me from whatever it was protecting me from, in particular loss or the threat of loss or whatever. And I was just able to just let go of all of it, unbelievably so. And it was such a relief. And that then it started to really empower me to, as I say, supercharge the journey. And the more I've worked on that, the more I've studied that, the self-compassion, and the more I've connected to my joy, the more liberating it's been, and the more I've been able to share that with other people, leading to doing something that I said I would never, ever do, which was becoming the dancing monkey on Instagram. But there's me with dancing videos on Instagram now, but that's not as a marketing tool. That's really purely to express my joy.
I love that. Yeah, it's really amazing you've just shared that. Actually, prior to this, 2 hours before this, I was in a coaching session being coached myself and taken through a very deep process. And I won't explain fully because I'm still actually digesting it myself, but I had a very strong visual of a horizontal line representing equanimity or balance, and then a wave, which at the start, earlier on in the line, it's sort of very extreme waves, which tend later on further down to the right, it sort of evens out and gets closer and eventually merges with the equanimity, the balance. And actually what I saw in between the gaps between the middle line and the waves was compassion. And for me, it was a really profound moment of compassion's what brings you home, not chastising and beating yourself up, which is a narrative that I've played out for most of my life. It's kind of, I've very much been driven for a lot of my life by the stick, by beating myself up and forcing myself to do things. And it kind of does work. But as I'm maturing and deepening my journey, actually softening and letting go and compassion is that way to the balance. So it's amazing you just shared this because it's very fresh in my mind. What has like you gave a little bit of flavor there, like what has compassion, what role has compassion played for you? And also I'm curious as to how you use compassion with your coaching.
The key role that compassion played for me is it's liberated me from the let's call it the demands of unrealistic ambition, maybe. But let me qualify that a little bit, because it's not that I'm not ambitious. I am absolutely ambitious. I want to live a comfortable life. I want to be successful, depending on how you define success. But and I want to enjoy, the trappings of that success without a doubt. But I'm not propelling myself forward towards some goal in the future. I'm very present at the moment because I'm very comfortable with who I am and very content with who I am in a way that I never was. I never have been all the way through my life until the last few years. And it's growing, it's snowballing, the momentum's, increasing. And it basically means rather than this forward movement, forward motion, I'm very content where I am at any particular moment in time. And that's due to the fact that I'm compassionate with myself. The other irony is that the more compassionate I am with myself, the more I achieve, which is incredible, because I set myself, I call them outrageous, but audacious, but I'm actually using the word outrageous now as well, goals. Absolutely. Like, for example, 4 years ago, I couldn't swim. And then a friend of mine, at the age of 53, I couldn't swim. And a friend of mine swam from island to island in Greece, which is like 5 kilometers. And I thought, I don't really want to be another CEO. I've sort of had enough of that life. I actually want something more purposeful and meaningful in my life. But swimming from island to island in Greece, wow, that's an ambition rather than another CEO job. I want to do that. So rather than saying I'm going to learn how to swim, having not been able, and tried many times throughout my life to learn how to swim and never been able to do it, I set myself the goal in the back of my mind, and I told lots of people about it. I said, I'm going to swim from island to island in Greece. That's my goal, 5 kilometers from scratch. And, an outrageous, audacious goal. But then I went off and I said, I'm going to do it really compassionately. I'm not going to beat myself up. I'm going to enjoy the process. And I went off, and as a result of that, I've been on the most incredible journey. Firstly, because, I don't believe in SMART goals anymore. SMART being specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. When I run now, I don't use my Garmin. I believe in meta goals, which is about enjoying the process and enjoying the journey. And I very much applied that principle to learning how to swim and being really compassionate. So incredibly ambitious, outrageous, audacious goal, but deliverable, compassionate steps to get there. And because I'm present and compassionate with myself along the way, not only have I smashed that island to island goal, I did a 6 kilometer swim in an estuary down in South Devon last year. And I, as a result of this journey of learning how to swim and just doing it and enjoying it, I realized that nearly every picture that I looked at that I really loved was of frozen lakes and docks. So, I hated cold, but then I had to learn how to get into freezing cold water. So I did a Wim Hof course, and now I'm swimming in frozen lakes, and I've got an ice park in my back garden and all of those sorts of things. And, there's no limit to what I can achieve now because I'm enjoying the journey, which means I don't give up because I'm in no hurry. Another thing that came out of it was this whole notion of time is almost meaningless because I don't know if you've come across this before, but another thing that came out of the coaching that I had 4.5 years ago, whenever it was this concept of productive working life. And I don't know if you've heard of productive working life before. And I don't even know if it's a real thing, but it absolutely worked for me and it absolutely works for my clients as well. Apparently, you can measure your productive working life from the age of 20 to the age of 80. And, there's a lot of 80-year-olds that are theoretically doing amazing things in the world and some doing not so amazing things. But it's the theory that you can contribute productively to the world on average between the age of 20 and the age of 80. When I had my coaching, I was 53 years old, which meant that I had 45% of my productive working life left to live. And I was like, hold on a second. You're telling me that I've got almost half my productive life left to live. I thought I was coasting to retirement, looking to take my nice big pension private pension at the age of 55. So what you're telling me is that I'm only halfway through pretty much. Well, the first thought that strikes me is I'm not doing all that all over again. It's been amazing. It's been incredibly privileged and I've achieved loads of things, but I've had enough of that and I really don't want to do that anymore. But the second thing you're telling me is that because I'm only halfway through and I've achieved all these things up until now, just imagine what I can achieve in the second half of my productive working life. It takes away the pressure of time completely. And therefore, coming back to compassion, I can be so much more compassionate in the way that I approach these goals. Because when I was 20 years old, I didn't think I've got to be a CEO by the time I'm 22 or by the time I'm 25. It was like, no, I want to move forward. I want to progress, but I want to pretty much enjoy the journey. And that's always been in the back of my mind. As even getting to a CEO, I always said, starting right at the bottom all the way up to there, that I'd rather work in a bar, if I wasn't enjoying what I was doing. And I absolutely meant that. It was about enjoying the journey. So it takes the pressure of time off in that, I didn't have to say, I didn't learn how to swim until the age of 53 or start learning how to swim until the age of 53 because I thought it was too late. Whereas all of a sudden, if I've got half of my productive working life left, it's not too late. I can do anything, but I just don't set myself unrealistic deadlines. So therefore, I carry on going and I just enjoy it. And, likewise, I think I mentioned that, I do handstands now. That's just because I know I can. And, if it takes me longer than it would take a 20-year-old, who cares? I just carry on going until I can do it. If I'm enjoying it, if I'm not enjoying it, then I just won't do it. So yeah, that's where compassion comes into it. And that's what I say to my clients as well. And that's how I work with them. So for example, I mentioned that I don't use my Garmin when I run now, because on reflection, I realized that I I only took up running at the age of about 53. It's when I gave up alcohol as well, about 4.5 years ago now. And I decided to get fit. I was, working really hard, quite stressed, counterbalancing that with, alcohol and whatever else. And I decided to just change that whole lifestyle. And as part of that, I got myself a Garmin, started running. Turned out I was quite good at it. So I started getting quite decent times. And then realized that every night when I was going to bed before I run, I was starting to dread waking up, because I knew I had to wake up and do a run. And I knew that I'd be, killing myself to beat my time every single time. And I was so competitive with myself that all the pleasure was taken out of it. And the irony is that the very first outdoor run that I ever did, because I started running in a gym on a treadmill, was in Barcelona on the seafront. And I was just away with my wife for a weekend. And I thought, okay, I want to run because I've been doing it now and I've got decent times, and I'll just go and see what it's like. I've only ever done a 5K run, and I ran 5K and thought, I'm going to carry on going because this is amazing. And I did a 10K. So it was absolutely beautiful. So then winding back to now, not using my Garmin, I sort of realized that I was being so competitive with myself that I was missing out on enjoying the process. And I've run around LA, around Tokyo, around Paris, all of these amazing places, and really loved it. But I was getting to the point where I didn't want to run anymore because I was competing with myself. So that's where compassion comes into it. And when I talk to my clients about, starting up exercise, for example, it's like, don't set yourself a crazy smart goal. Set yourself a meta goal of enjoying it. Run with some friends and just chat to them. I mean, you burn the same calories if you're running at, a talking pace as you do if you're killing yourself. So you may as well just enjoy it and listen to the birds and look at the scenery and whatever, because there's more chance you'll continue it. And that's how I carry on and I deliver these amazing, outrageous, audacious goals, because I don't give up now, because I'm enjoying it all the way through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's like the analogy or the story of, the person that will walk the furthest is the one that enjoys the walking. And it's so simple.
Well, absolutely.
It's so simple, right? I think there's a false understanding that perhaps when we're contented and living from gratitude that we become lazy and slothful. But my experience is that actually effectiveness comes more through hard decisions than volume. And this for me was my perspective on this really shifted on reading the book 4,000 Weeks, which is all about acknowledging our own limitations of how few weeks we have on this planet. And actually in the acknowledgement of the limitations, we make harder decisions. And in the harder decisions, we really prioritize ruthlessly. And my experience is the opposite, and exactly what you're sharing. When you are more compassionate, when you live from a state of contentment and not chasing, and it's more through enjoyment and flow and joy, what you can achieve is far greater than through the stick and the carrot and stick analogy. And I'm curious, you've achieved some amazing things, CEO of Urban Outfitters and the Conrad Shop. I'm curious as to what message you would have loved to, what would you love to have said to that version of you?
That's quite a challenging one, because I very much appreciate how privileged I am now off the back of the success that I've had in the past. Mm-hmm. Because, but at the same time, I was very hard on myself. There were obviously some underlying motivations for me to deliver that success for myself. And part of that was absolutely, and I'm totally aware of it, the need to guarantee financial security for my family, having lost it all as a child myself. So, I was obsessed with that, obsessed with the knowledge that there was only so far that I wanted to fall in my life, having lost it all before. Also, I've seen extreme wealth in my life on lots of occasions. At one point, my father was business partner with the King's Doctor in Saudi Arabia. So as kids, we were taken around all the palaces and everything. So I've seen incredible extreme wealth. And I know I don't want any part of that. I've worked with multiple billionaires, and I know that I don't really want any part of that. So my ambition is to be comfortable, is to have a good quality of life. that's it, and to be happy. And I absolutely believe that we all have one primary motivation, and that is the desire to be happy. And one of the most powerful books that I've ever read, listened to multiple times, is The Art of Happiness by the Dalai Lama. That really everything's driven by that primary motivation. Because if I said to you, you could have all the money in the world, all the success in the world, all the love in the world, but it would make you unhappy, you wouldn't want it. So actually what you're looking for is happiness. And it's actually about reconnecting to the happiness that's there already. So if I look back and I think about, what would I say to myself? I'd say that don't be so hard on yourself. Absolutely. But probably most importantly, two things. One is, and this is probably my favorite saying of all time, the only permanence is impermanence. It's fleeting. Everything's fleeting. So it comes and goes. So it's just a moment in time. Don't worry, And the other one is don't worry about what other people think, because firstly, they probably don't even think that. And secondly, who cares? Because, they're going to change their mind, and they're probably not going to be part of your life further down the line anyway. They're going to be irrelevant at some point in time. And also, who are they? Because if you could actually name them, and it's an interesting exercise that I do with my clients sometimes when they talk about, them, to actually get them to put a name to who they are specifically and what they're talking about. And it's actually quite difficult for them to do that. And especially when they're competing with other people. And, I had this with one specific client where, he was saying he was feeling quite bad, even though he's incredibly successful. He was managing £1 billion property fund, multiple houses and private schools for his kids and holidays and whatever. And he was feeling quite hard done by. And he was saying that so many people were better off than him. And I said, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, how well off do you think you are in your life? Not just financially, but just generally in life, if you look at all the different areas. And he said he was about a 5. And I said, okay, well, name someone that you think is a 7 or 8, but not a 7 or 8 in individual areas, a 7 or 8 overall that you know of. And I gave him the exercise to do between sessions, and he came back and he had different names for different people in different areas. And I was like, that wasn't the exercise. I want you to name one person who you think has it all, who you think is better off than you in all areas. And he couldn't do it because we beat ourselves up. We're so hard on ourselves and we're so judgmental on ourselves for whatever reason, because we think we need so much more. We think we have to achieve so much more. And in reality, we don't, because it comes back to what I just said before. Once we actually realize that what we're looking for is to be happy, there's so much of that around us right now. And it's so much easier to identify it when we know that that's what we're looking for. And it means that we stop chasing it down the road. Yeah, but it doesn't stop us from being, from achieving and from being ambitious and from growing, because it's in our nature as humans to grow. That's really important, to move forward, to evolve. That's part of the fun of the journey. So yeah, that's probably what I'd say is don't worry about what other people think. And, part of that was pretty extreme in my example, because I was creating these false identities. There's probably not much more extreme, than that. But, the fact that I have no need to do that anymore, I'm so comfortable with who I am that it was wasted energy and wasted effort. And I suppressed so much throughout my life in terms of stress, pressure, just in terms of, appearances, whether it's to convince myself that I was enjoying things or I wasn't feeling it, or whether it was to put this mask out to the world. And all it does is come back to bite you. So, yeah, I'd say don't worry about what other people think. It doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. I'm curious as to, I know we're speaking hypothetical here, but how that would have changed how you were back then. And I'll give you a little bit more context as to why I'm asking that. I think an argument from a lot of people who perhaps are where we once were, and this isn't to talk down to them at all, it's just part of experience, right? But one of the arguments I know when I was perhaps a previous version of myself, my argument would have been, well, it's okay for you. You're there now. It's okay for you to say this. It's like what Jim Carrey says. It's like, I wish everyone could be rich, because then they'll realize it's not money what they're looking for. And, whenever you see that post on Instagram, what have you, the comments are, well, it's okay for you, you've got the money. It's like, no, I promise you. And there's something, a kind of quote that I've coined, which is, it takes finding yourself to realize how lost you were. And I have experienced a lot of success. I was chasing the money and I got all those things. And if someone said these things to me, I just probably would have said that, like, it's okay for you. You're there already. And it probably wouldn't have landed, because I was so lost in my own story and my own chasing and what have you. But so I guess the question is, like, how do you help or guide people, leaders, successful people who were in a similar situation to you, where they had this false identity? How do you help guide people in those situations back to their truth and hear, like, what you're sharing?
Coming back to a word that I use a lot, because I absolutely believe it, I've had an incredibly privileged life, even though I've had incredible loss. I've, in terms of success, career-wise, I've had my dream jobs, and I can't deny that, and I've traveled the world. I've traveled first class, stayed in all the best hotels and whatever else, and pretty much partied all the way through my life and had an amazing time. So I wouldn't change any of that. But what I would do, and I probably wouldn't change a lot of the decisions that I made along the way, absolutely, because I've loved it, to a degree. What I did do, though, was put myself under so much mental pressure. And that's a thing that really took a lot of the joy away from the journey. I wouldn't have wanted to not be in the roles that I was in. So I'm not talking about not being ambitious and not being successful. I would absolutely, if I had my time over again, want to be the managing director of Urban Outfitters in Europe. I would, and create a legacy across the whole of the continent and travel across these different countries and connect with these amazing different cultures and whatever else. Amazing. What a privilege. I would absolutely want to be the CEO of the Conran shop and work with Terence Conran, and, my dream, a brand that absolutely shaped the way that I view the world through design, and get to sit and work with my hero and reinvent the brand on a global stage and open the biggest and best design store in the world in Korea and all of these amazing things. I would absolutely do that again. But what I would not do is beat myself up all the way through and put myself under so much immense pressure that I ended up with panic attacks. I ended up with psoriasis. I ended up with alopecia. And that's all mental stuff. I could have done everything that I did without putting myself under that pressure. And that's the difference. I would say that the biggest change for me was when I started meditating, the biggest change. And I became a significantly better CEO when I started meditating. It was a game changer for me. And the reason for that was I gave up catastrophizing. I realized, it suddenly dawned on me that it was all fiction. So I was able to just work with whatever I needed to work with at the moment. And the rest of it was just whatever. I was just able to let go of it. In fact, a couple of things came from that, from my meditation journey. Two major things came from it. One is, they call it a meditation practice for a reason, because it's really difficult and you have to practice. And it's about, it's like doing weights. You have to do it through repetition. And when you first do it, everybody says pretty much that they can't meditate. And that's because they try too hard. And it takes months. And on average, I think it takes about 3 months. And it certainly took 3 months for me for it suddenly to click and for me to realize what was going on. And what was going on was I was trying, as opposed to just noticing and just being present and just being aware. And that was the game changer, that I started to observe and be curious. And when I started to observe the thoughts coming in and then going, and then another thought coming in, and then going, and then another thought coming in, and every single one of those thoughts was totally random. And I realized that I wasn't controlling the thoughts were controlling me. And when I let go of them, I was able to let go of, as I say, the whole, desire, the whole tendency to catastrophize. And that was a word that I'd never used until I started meditating. And it was so true. It summed it up brilliantly. So that made me so much more effective. That was the first one. The other one was, and this is the beautiful human connection thing, is that, and an example of this is on a practical level, on two practical levels. When I left Urban Outfitters, I was on a 1.5-year gardening leave where I wasn't allowed to even speak to anybody about another job, which was great. I had plenty of cash and whatever, but it was a bit odd. That's when I started to learn how to meditate and went off with my family to Cuba and camping and loads of things like that. Amazing. And when I decided to go back out and look for a job, in fact, my wife sort of pushed me out the door because I was quite content by that point that, actually I'm enjoying myself. I don't know if I want another job. But I was only 50, whatever at the time. So it was a little bit premature for me to be doing that. And we couldn't have afforded it either. I didn't even have a LinkedIn account. So I'd never been about building myself up. It had been about building brands, whether it was Urban Outfitters or Conman Shop. So it was a real challenge for me to put myself out there. And I'd never even answered the phone to executive search people, so I'd never networked with any of those people. So when I went out there and started having to put myself out in the marketplace, I knew I didn't want to go into fashion. I'd sort of had enough of that. I wanted to go into design because I've been collecting furniture for quite a while. And I found it really hard. And I found it a real struggle. I was just trying to sell myself. And I was going into these conversations and it felt like I was swimming against treacle. I felt like, it was forced. And all I was doing was essentially talking through my CV for the half hour that I was sitting with these people. So it wasn't fun for me and it wasn't fun for them at all. And I remember sitting doing this amazing meditation called the Love and Kindness meditation, which I don't know if you're aware of, which is where you wish yourself well and then you wish someone you love well, and then someone that you know that you don't know their name, like the postman or something, and then someone you have a conflict with, and then all of you together, then, all humans, then all living beings. And it's a beautiful meditation. And I was sitting there one day doing this meditation, and I just suddenly had this light bulb moment. And I was like, why am I trying to prove myself to these people? Because they've got my CV. They know what I've done. Actually, I'm going to give up on all of that. It's just not nice for me and it's not nice for them. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to set myself one challenge. And that challenge is just to leave them with a smile on their face, whether it's half an hour or whether that's an hour, whatever it is, that's my only goal. And let's see what comes of that, because I want to enjoy the process and I want them to enjoy it as well. And it was incredible. Within a couple of weeks, I was, had the interview with the Conman Shop and whatever. It was a game changer. And that comes back to this beautiful human connection that I went into those conversations wishing them well. And that was it. I had no agenda of my own other than to make them happy. And this is very much, the relationship with the clients as well, is that, the universe will give back. It's, infectious gratitude, let's call it. And, if you put it out there, it's going to come back in spades. It really will. So that's, if I look back on my career, that's what I would have done. I would have probably looked after myself a lot better. I would have been more mindful of what was going on, both mentally and physically as well, actually. But I wouldn't have wanted a different career. I would have wanted to just be more present for it and to enjoy it more.
Yeah, I love all that. I think it's such an amazing point. You said you wouldn't have done it much different. It's just the how you'd have done it. I totally agree. I loved some of the success that I created, traveling the world. I loved driving my Ford Mustang. It was a little cringe to say that out loud, but I really enjoyed that. But it's like the how, what was the fuel that's driving you. And I think, you can be driven by the stick, and it can move you and it can get you really far, but it's so exhausting and it can lead to all these physical conditions that you're explaining. And actually, it doesn't get you as far as if you are driven by curiosity, love, compassion, as you say, gratitude, joy, curiosity, inspiration. And
well, what's really interesting is that I've had this conversation with many people, and the fact that I'm even vocalizing it now on camera is quite strange. But if I could use one word to describe how I felt about being CEO and going out there and getting another CEO job, the one word by the time I ended it was repulsion. That's how strongly I felt. We talk about connecting to our inner voice and our feelings, our feeling, mind. And that's how my body was just like, no, I just cannot take this anymore. I don't feel that anymore. I just feel as though if I wanted to do that, I could really enjoy it. It's because I've done the work. I'm so comfortable with where I am. But there's only so far you can go on momentum. And I've always been a big believer, or I always was a big believer in momentum. For me, when I was in fashion and retail, the most important meeting of the year was always the first meeting in January, because you come off this big high Christmas, and that's when the peak sales are, and everybody lets their big collective sigh of relief, and that's it. But I'm like, no, you're up here right now. Now's the time to keep the momentum going, because that's going to propel us forward and take us to another level completely. So I would always be like, now, come on, everybody, this is the most important meeting of the year. And it was like that with my career. It was always about momentum, and it was always about a million miles a minute without taking any time to reflect on the impact of that. And then you just hit a brick wall. And, so you've got to be very careful about that. And that's why it's always important, and I do this with my clients a lot, or all my clients actually, it's essential, is to look at all the different areas of your life, because every area of your life is equally important, and you can only ignore them for so long without it coming back to haunt you.
Excuse me for interrupting the show, but I wanted to ask you, have you subscribed yet? I ask because this is a brand new podcast, and it will really help me out in my mission to spread coaching as far and wide as possible. I truly believe that coaching can change the world, and your simple subscription helps me out more than you realize. So thank you for your help in advance. And if you feel like this episode might help a friend out or another coach, then go ahead and share it. Thanks in advance, and let's get back into the show.
Yeah. I want to bring it a little bit back to the meditation point. There's an amazing quote, I can't remember who says it, but it's, all the world's problems stem from man's inability to sit alone in silence. I paraphrase it a little bit. And I think without the willingness to sit in stillness with ourselves, we aren't aware of how much pain we could be inflicting on ourselves. And I think, especially if we look at the crisis that's happening with masculinity and men's mental health, the answer to it is stillness. The answer is to sit with discomfort, because in that discomfort, we start to gain clarity. We start to ask these bigger questions. If we mask over this discomfort with busyness, as you say, it all comes crashing down at some point. And for me, it was the same. I had a breakdown on the tube just outside Sloane Square. And I just think it's so tragic that for most people, it is some drastic event like a breakdown or depression or whatever it is, or a physical condition. I think I just would love for people to start that earlier, before the pain gets too much. And I'm curious as to what advice you might give to people who hear this, and perhaps, I think most of my listeners have started their mindfulness journey to some degree, but what advice would you give to people who are relatively early in their mindfulness and meditation journey?
Well, just before we do that, my older brother committed suicide in his early 20s as a function of all the stuff that happened to us when we were kids. So very early on in my life, I saw, and ultimate respect for him, because I think it was an incredibly brave thing for him to do, but it was very short-sighted, because it was after the breakup of a relationship, and he felt as though I unfortunately had a twin brother. He had us as brothers, but nobody as close as we had for each other. So we were able to support each other. He didn't really have that. So he felt as though he was alone in the world. But it was a very short-sighted decision that he made. And what I've observed throughout the course of my life is that it comes back to this whole, this phrase that I absolutely love, which is, as I said before, the only permanence is impermanence. It's the fact that nothing stays the same. There's no constant other than consciousness or awareness. Other than that, everything changes always. Within the course of this conversation, things have changed millions of times. Everything's changed. Every cell in your body changes throughout your life. So, I've observed that through the course of my life, my trajectory has been like that there's dips and then it goes back up again. But generally, it's been going in a positive forward direction. And that's a really important point. So in terms of, so it's about not beating yourself up, and it's also about forgiveness and compassion and all of those sorts of things, but also realizing that however bad it is, it's just a very specific moment in time, and you can always reduce it further and further and further. And you can sit there like we're sitting here right now. It could be pouring with rain outside, but it's not inside. It's in this very moment we're sitting here having a lovely conversation. Everything's perfect. So it depends on your perspective. And I would say that for meditation, the thing about meditation is, and people early in their journey, it's not being too hard on yourself. And I say that in terms of not trying to let go of thinking, because letting go of thinking is a losing battle. You're never going to stop thinking. And it's the realization that that's not the goal of meditation. The goal of meditation is just to notice that you're thinking. That's it. And if you notice that you're thinking 10 times or 1,000 times in a minute, it's the same. In fact, 1,000 times is probably even better than the 10 times, because it basically means that you're being present. And all that happens is, and the reason why you need an anchor, like your breath or a candle or whatever it is so that you notice that you're not anchored to that. And then bring yourself back to that and go, oh, okay, I've forgotten that I was focusing on my breath, or, oh, I've forgotten that I was focusing on a candle. And there you go. Here's the candle. What am I thinking about? And then you notice the next thought that comes in, and you're like, oh, I'm thinking about a hedgehog. Where's that come from? And then you just go, okay, I'm thinking about a hedgehog. Fine, let go of it. And then a minute later or whatever, you realize that you've completely lost track and you're not focused on your breath or whatever. And then you go, oh, I'm thinking again. Oh, I'm thinking about McDonald's. What's that all about? It's just totally random. So don't beat yourself up. Just notice that you're thinking. That's all you have to do. And the other thing is there's something called the cosmic joke. I don't know if you've heard of the cosmic joke before, which is people go on something like a 20-year journey in search of enlightenment.
Yeah.
But actually, there's no such thing.
Yeah.
Because what they're looking for is right here, right now.
Yeah.
And it's just awareness. That's all it is. So all we have to do is just ask ourselves if we're aware. If I said to you, ask yourself the question, am I aware? And then pause for like a nanosecond and then answer the question in your mind. You did that now.
Yes.
And what was the answer to the question? Am I aware?
I actually asked myself it twice, but it's hard to give you an answer because it was a feeling.
So were you aware of that feeling?
Yes.
Well, then you're aware.
Yes.
So there you go. So you're like, oh, okay, interesting. Mm-hmm. I'm aware. And then this is the essence of meditation. So when we talk about enlightenment, actually what people are looking for is right here, right now. So if you say, am I aware? And you go, yeah, I'm aware, sort of. Mm-hmm. And then you go, well, okay, well, where is that awareness? Is it in your mind? Is it in your body? Is it in your feet? Is it in your hands? Is it on the screen? Is it in the sky? Where's this awareness? And then you realize that everything's in your awareness. Everything. The moon's in your awareness. The whole universe is in your awareness. And then you go, okay, that's interesting. So everything's in my awareness. And then you go, okay, well, what does it feel like? And you go, well, what doesn't it feel like? Is it busy? Well, no, actually, there was nothing there when I was just aware. And then you go, okay, well, it's really calm and it's really joyful and it's really serene. That's awareness. That's consciousness. That's enlightenment. That's what you're looking for. And that's what, when you do meditation over the course of time, that's sort of where you're trying to go. But actually, you don't need to. There's something called the direct path and the indirect path. The indirect path is the 20-year journey of going to look for enlightenment. The direct path is you don't really need to do all that meditating. Just ask yourself if you're aware, and then ask yourself where that awareness is and what it feels like. And it's really interesting because when you strip away all the layers of the false narrative, like the layers of the onion, like you're not your thoughts, because they just are random. you're not your feelings, because your feelings are linked to your thoughts and your emotions are linked to your feelings and all of those sorts of things. Strip those away. You're not even your body, because every cell in your body changes throughout your life. So you can't be that. Anything that changes, anything that's fleeting, can't be the essence of you. So the only constant is your awareness, because it was the same when you were 5 years old, the same when you're 25 years old. It's going to be the same when you're 90 years old. And that's really empowering, because nothing can touch it. Because when you explore it, it's exactly the same. Anytime you explore it, it's calm, it's serene, it's joyful. So whether you have a bereavement or whether you win a cup or medal or something, beneath it all, it's all the same, and nothing can change it. And that is the essence of meditation. So actually, it's about simplifying what meditation is all about. It's just connect to your awareness, and everything else just comes and goes, like the clouds in the sky. And then you can just choose which one you want to interact with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. And I've played with I've practiced some koan meditation. You sort of, if you, how can you clap with one hand, and these sort of questions, which a split moment, you have these moments of enlightenment where there is no thought. It's just, as you say, pure awareness. And I've taken my clients as well through the same example of when you speak to yourself, when you think, who's speaking? And they were, well, I am. It's like, but who's listening? I said, well, I am. It's like, well, how can you speak? How can you speak to yourself? If you're the one listening, you can't be speaking to yourself. And they're like, no. And there's this moment of like, oh, I get it. So the thought isn't me. And I'm like, no, the thought is your conditioning. It's a thought. It's not you. And I think there's a moment in everyone's life where they realize, I am not my thoughts. And for me, that was just this most transformational moment where it was just like the day before, I was walking around totally attached to my thoughts and thinking that my thoughts were me. And then there was the day after, it was like, oh, I don't actually need to give that thought any weight. I could just let that go and create space for the next thought and the next thought and the next thought and the next. And eventually it's just like, you're just emptying all the time, emptying, letting go, letting go, letting go.
But it's also not even necessarily about letting go, because you almost put yourself under pressure if you're trying to let go. What it is probably more about just accepting that it's all there, it all exists. So coming back to this analogy of clouds in the sky, imagine that all the sky is your awareness, and all the clouds are all the thoughts and experiences and everything that are happening. They're all there. They're always there at the end of the day. The problem is that we get sucked into them. They control us as opposed to us controlling them. It's about accepting that they're always there, and then just cherry picking which one you want to interact with, rather than them sucking you in. You decide. And it's like having 10 doors that you can walk through in your life at any point in time. And unfortunately, what we tend to do as humans is we go into autopilot, and the brain does this. It's these neural pathways that we carve out throughout our lives. And basically, we just automatically go through the one that we think is going to give us the best result. And that is based on history. That's based on this, on average, has given us the best outcome. So therefore, we'll go through that door. That means we're shutting 9 out of 10 doors. What you do with meditation, in particular mindfulness, and then as that evolves, is you keep all 10 doors open, because every single situation, no matter what it is new. There's no two situations that have ever been the same, because this conversation, as I say, changed. Everything's changed in the course of this conversation. So there's nothing that's exactly the same. No set of circumstances is ever exactly the same. And therefore, keep all 10 doors open, and it could be that it's door number 2 rather than door number 7 that you should be going through for the optimum result. And that's what creates significantly more creativity as well. And that's when I come back to talking about being a significantly better CEO when I started meditating. It's because I was able to be so much more creative. I was able to see the bigger picture, and I was able to cherry pick the answers and the responses and the story, because life's about the story at the end of the day. And how we understand the story and how we want to create a story for ourselves as well. And the other thing is that it's not just about interacting with the thoughts. It's about then creating your own ones, reframing it. And because the thoughts come and go, why not create new ones?
Totally, yeah. I remember very early on my meditation journey is listening to Ray Dalio, who said, in an interview with Tony Robbins, who asked him what was the biggest habit that's had the greatest impact on his career, and he said by far meditation. He said the thing with meditation is that when you get an idea, there is always a bigger and better and more profound idea deeper. And what I've noticed in my own meditation is that, if an idea comes in, when I'm perhaps a little bit weaker, I might go, oh, that's a good idea, and I'll run with it, and I'll just start creating, and away my day goes, and then the next 24 hours I've been deeply unconscious just from this one thought. But what I've noticed is that the more space I create and the more stillness I create, if a thought is really meant for me, it comes back, but it comes back with more precision, more potency, more clarity. And what I'm really trying to step into myself is to create more space for these depths of insights and more slowness before I take action, which is a big challenge for me when I'm a warrior, a doer, as someone who can take very, very fast action. But what I'm really trying to bring into my life is really creating that space between the stimulus and the response, the thought and the action, and really making sure that the action comes from inspiration, my heart, using your words, purpose, joy, balance, and making sure the action comes from that place rather than a egoic, driven, rapid, because a thought from the ego feels like I have to take it quickly. It feels rushed, like, oh, I don't want to miss this. This is the thing I've got this is the thing that's going to get me to the thing. But actually thoughts or inspiration, ideas from the heart are very subtle and slow, and they sort of take time to build and get clearer and clearer. And eventually when it's for you, it's like that. I remember the intensive I ran at the start of the year. That was a prime example of just this thought I want to run an in-person intensive, and I just let it sit there. I didn't do anything with that time, and it built pace. And eventually I booked a location. My wife was like, shouldn't you start marketing that? I was like, I'll fill it. And a week later I maybe wrote a post, and it was a good post, and I got and then my wife was like the day before, have you planned what you're going to say? I was like, no, I'll think of it on the flight. And this is what happens when something's for you and you allow it to sort of cultivate and brew, and sort of it picks up pace very, very quickly. Have you got any examples of this that, and in your own words, because I know with your messaging and what you do is helping people reconnect to joy and purpose. So I'm really curious as well, like, how do you guide your clients to connect to this joy, this purpose, where it is kind of effortless? That's what I would describe it as.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's trying to understand what their inner voice is telling them and what their passions actually are, because your intensive reminded me of when I was managing director of Urban Outfitters, and we used to have these big store events, company-wide events where there'd be like quite a few hundred people, and then I'd have to go up on stage and talk to them. And public speaking has always been an absolute nightmare for me. I've never been able to prepare and do a prepared speech. I've always got really nervous about that. But what I found was if I didn't prepare anything, if I just went on stage and talked about what I was passionate about, what I absolutely believed in the end, they'd have to drag me off, because I was having so much fun, and it was coming from a really genuine, honest, passionate place, like you, when you were talking about the intensive, that you didn't really need to do that much preparation, because it was coming from a really honest, open, genuine, passionate place. And that's something that you intuitively know about. You don't need to train for that. You absolutely don't. It's there. This knowledge is there. And that's the way I felt about it. So, I'd never prepare anything. I just go and talk about what felt right, what felt honest, what felt connected me to my passion. And, likewise, this is something that I've done all the way through my career. I've changed my career multiple times. I've worked in a bank very successfully. I gave that up. I went to recruitment. I did that very successfully. Gave that up, took an 80% pay cut and went into fashion, literally an 80% pay cut, and worked my way from the bottom back up again. I've obviously given up being a CEO to now do this. Every single time it's been about listening to my body and listening to my inner voice. And because I'm now very attuned to it, okay, I probably exaggerate a little bit when I say that my body was telling me that the one word was repulsion about being a CEO, but that's how connected I am to that feeling now. That, I'm like, okay, that's it. No more. I'm going to do something completely different. And no matter what society says, no matter what anybody says, I'm going to do what feels right for me, what my inner voice is telling me. So it's about, peeling away these layers and connecting to that. Because the reason why I feel I've been relatively successful in my life is because I've done that, because I have connected to flow. I've connected to what I love. And I mentioned earlier that, when I got into fashion, I said, all the way through as I was being promoted up through the ranks, I was like, if I don't enjoy this, I'll go and work in a bar, because I work to support my social life. I don't have a social life to support my work. And I was always adamant about that. So, I once in my life took work home. This is how bad it was. And I didn't do it. I couldn't, because I was like, this is intruding on my home life. I can't do it. I'd rather stay at work until midnight, but, and I did that very rarely. But yeah, it was about connecting to your passion so that actually it doesn't feel like hard work. Mm-hmm. That's the thing. And chop and change. Because the other thing is I know multiple people. I've had this conversation with some, because I know a few very successful people, especially in retail, that, I was at dinner with somebody not that long ago, and he said to me, I can't believe I've worked so hard for these companies, these really big companies, and I'd get up and I'd be there at 7 o'clock in the morning and whatever else. He goes, 3 of them don't even exist anymore. And I'm like, wow, these are billion-pound companies. And he's like, and the one I've just left, that's not going to exist for much longer either. And we dedicate so much of our time to these, and actually they're fleeting as well. I think Jeff Bezos and others said the only thing that he can guarantee is that at some point Amazon won't exist. It's like the fall of the Roman Empire. At the end of the day, like look at the British Empire. There's nothing lasts forever. So yeah, I can't remember the exact question that you just asked me, but yeah, that's my view.
Yeah, it reminds me of the quote, don't ask what the world wants, ask what makes you feel alive, because that's what the world wants. And I think if I was to draw out a distinction from your career and your success, it really sounds like to me that the key to it was having that certainty in you that I have to enjoy what I do. And if I don't, I will go and work as a bartender, having that conviction.
Well, I moved around until I found something that didn't feel like work. Yeah. And it was combining fashion with maths, essentially. And I was naturally quite good at maths. And I always had an active interest in fashion. And it was combined with an incredible social life, because there were about 300 people of a similar age going out every single night, all working in the same office. And it was like, okay, those 3 things for me work brilliantly. So, and then wanting to understand how everything worked, because my brain was made up that way. And there's an incredible book that I read years later that really summed up my view and my approach, and that's called The Art of Learning by Josh Waitzkin. I think maybe I've recommended this to you before, but he's an incredible guy. One of the guys that Tim Ferriss really looks up to, actually. I've subsequently discovered. And he wrote this book called The Art of Learning, and in there's 2 chapters. One chapter is called Small Circles, which is about, say, a chess player, for example, individual moves that they make, and they do it thousands of times through repetition, the same move. Then they move on to the next one, internalize it, then the next one, and whatever. And the next chapter is called Big Circles. And that's basically the people that go on to become the Grand Masters are the ones that have done all of those things, but they can pull away and they can read the story. They can connect all the dots. So not only can they see 5 moves ahead, they can see 15, 20 moves ahead, because they've read the patterns and the story. And that's very much what I was about, is understanding the component parts, but then pulling away and seeing the bigger picture. And, as I've progressed through my career, I would say that, one of the best bits of advice I was ever given when I became a CEO is to find time to do nothing. It's a game changer. because, if you're so engrossed in the work, it's like seeing the wood for the trees. You'll miss the big picture, and it's the big picture that really moves things forward. It could be one big decision that changes the fortunes of everything, as opposed to being just really busy. So as I got more and more senior, I started doing significantly less and became significantly more productive and effective.
Yeah, beautiful. I'm going to be sending this podcast to my CEO clients because it's the same message, and they come up with the idea, they know it. It's just really living into it. But yeah, this has been a beautiful conversation, and just to finish on before I come to the sort of quick fire questions, I think what you shared there also makes a great coach, right? Pattern recognition. And for a lot of coaches, it's just about getting the reps in, as you say, the little circles. I'm just connecting this now. It's like the little circles is we coach lots, we coach lots, we coach lots. And after a while, when you coach lots, you start to see patterns. You start to see patterns in human behavior and psychology and the patterns in your coaching. And yeah, what I'm hearing, and actually true mastery of coaching, is around, I think, pattern recognition. Because for me, my biggest breakthroughs have been in noticing my patterns and breaking through those patterns. And that's when you have the quantum leap in your life. And I'm right now in a process of breaking a very, very big pattern. And I know by the end of this year, I'm going to experience a very big quantum leap on the back of it. And it's all about what you're sharing about time, space. And I'm looking at my calendar in September. I have nothing in there. Nothing. I mean, I've got a few sessions with you and a few others, but absolutely nothing. And it's been very, very challenging for me because my ego is like, Joel, like, you've got nothing in September, like you're a pretty planned guy. And I'm like, no, I'm just gonna have space, and have that space to allow whatever comes through me. And I'm not, my goal is to simply let things simmer until it's so blatantly for me that I can't help but run with it. And something landed recently for me is Wayne Dyer, who says motivation is where you take a task or a project and run with it, whereas inspiration is where a project and task takes you and runs with you. And I think that's, for me, the next transition in my life, is where I allow inspiration to run with me, and I'm fully surrendered, and I'm like, I trust.
You have to be open to it.
Totally.
For that to happen.
Yeah.
And you have to give yourself space.
Exactly.
In order for it to happen. And you have to be mindful and not sucked into all the other thoughts, to notice it and to be able to cherry pick it when it does arrive as well. That's really, really important. And the other major realization I've had, and it happened on one of your coaching days, was that all of us, and myself in particular, are exactly where we're supposed to be in this moment in time. Always.
Yeah. It's just so many layers to that understanding of that, and I think it's a beautiful place to end. I want to just finish with some quick fire questions. So what advice would you give to the version of you that just started coaching?
Believe in yourself.
Beautiful. And what
it's going to happen.
It's going to happen, yeah. Love that. What advice would your future self give you now?
Enjoy the journey.
Enjoy the journey, yeah. Nice. And what is your favorite coaching question?
Good question. See, that's a difficult one because that implies an agenda, almost. And because I feel like I'm an open book when I come into these conversations, or that's the intention anyway, I don't have a specific question that I think is the best question. So it's a very difficult question for me to answer. And that might sound like a cop-out.
No, it's almost like it's almost like a Cohen question, right? Do you have any, I suppose I could ask, do you have any get out of jail free cards, where perhaps you've got lost in a thought in your mind and you're like, I have no idea.
I suppose I could, I can answer that question actually, because it will just be, how does that feel?
Yeah, love that.
It's the question.
Yeah, beautiful. And then just to finish, the final question, if you could broadcast one message to worldwide TV, what would that message be?
connect on a human level. We're all one.
Love that. Beautiful, Hugh. Well, thank you so much for sharing. Is there any final thoughts you'd like to share? And also, where can people connect with you, follow you?
Final thought, take time for yourself, connect to joy as frequently as possible. It's within you, and take time to do nothing. That's really important, because doing nothing is doing everything. Absolutely. I can be found on my website, hughwahla.com, or on LinkedIn, or on Instagram and Facebook, Hugh Wahla. Yeah, that's it, I think.
Beautiful. Yeah, well, I'll put your links below in the show notes. And yeah, it's been such a pleasure, and look forward to continuing this journey with you as well.
Thank you very much, Joel. It's been a pleasure.
Sending love. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I really hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, go ahead and share it with a friend, a coach, or anyone that you feel could benefit. It helps them out, it helps me out. I think it's just a kind thing to do. And if you haven't, make sure you're subscribed. I'm just getting started with this podcast. I've got so many amazing episodes, so much value, so many guests planned. It's really my goal to make this the one place you want to come to for all things coaching and the business of coaching. And come say hi, send me a message on Instagram. I don't bite hard. I don't bite. I am friendly, and I'd love to meet you and answer any questions that you have and just have a good conversation. And would love to hear your thoughts on today's episodes too. Anyway, I will see you around, sending you so much love, and have a beautiful rest of your day.